You know, I've never followed a robot before, so I'm going to have to see if the question and answers, I can even keep up with what Bina was able to do. So let me just start by saying, you don't need to, let me go back one. You don't need to see Bina or go across the street to realize the future is here already. It's just as John Legend says, at times we're already late. And the one thing we know about the future is this. Change, it's inevitable. It's progress that's actually optional. And I'm so old that I now realize I did most of my work in my life in a different century and in a different economy. So if you're all wondering, why is it that kids today, 20 to 35, and that's who you are having a harder time getting a decent job or making money, one chart tells it all, the difference between my life and my son's life. So there are 4 lines there. They represent wages, jobs, productivity, and growth. And if you could see, when I was born around the 1950s, all those things went together. So when a politician said the economy's growing, what he really meant was productivity's growing, wages are growing, and jobs are growing. And then we see around 1995 or so, 1985 or so, that green line, which is wages, falls off the growth train. So now we have growth in productivity, growth in the GDP, growth in jobs, but no growth in wages. And we now know we've had 20 years where people really haven't gotten a raise in America. And then if you look at what happens if you're born at the turn of the century, all of a sudden you now can have growth in the economy, growth in productivity, and no growth in good jobs, and no growth in good wages. So if you're having a problem today, it's because the economy of today doesn't work like your parents. And when your parents tell you just do what they did, forget it. It's not going to really work anymore. And that's why 40% of all kids are now living home with their parents, not because of family values, I don't think, but because it's an economic reality if you want to live your parents' life. Now, the second thing we know, and I'll just pass by this quickly, is that I used to live in a one-job-in-a-lifetime economy. You know, the employer managed my health care and my wages and my career and my training, gave me a gold watch at 65, and I retired. I had one job, basically, in a lifetime. My son is 31, he's had 9 jobs. And now 8 to 12 jobs by the time you're 35. And then in my day, life was easy. Like, I don't really understand a business model when the largest transportation company in the world has no cars, and the largest hospitality company in the world has no room, and Amazon and Alibaba, the largest retailers, have no inventory, and Facebook, the largest content provider in the world, pays for no content. That is really weird for me to think about of how an economy works. And what it makes me understand is there's a guy named Andy Grove. Andy Grove founded Intel. Intel chips made all of this possible here today. And he says at times in the world for a company or country, there's a strategic inflection point. Not like your normal turning point, but a big change. And we're in that big change right now. And the first reaction, particularly of politicians, at times of big change, guess what? Denial. Say it's not happening. Try to do the old things that once worked in the old economy and try to believe they could work again in the new economy. But it's not working, and this says it all. 50% of workers in America make less than $15 an hour. 47% of Americans couldn't find $400 in case of an unexpected expense. 10 million people are workless. The median college age, if you went to college, is just slightly higher than a non-college educated person in my generation. So this new economy is not working for people as well, and it's only going to get worse. 83% of jobs making less than $20 an hour are going to be affected. The World Economic Forum talks about all the changes that are going to occur at retail stores. NPR tells you that the largest job in 29 states is driving a truck. 3.5 million people, 5 million people support them, and we saw somewhat today that the future is going to be driverless trucks. And the list goes on and on. Oxford, 47% of all jobs are going to be eliminated. Robots could put 15 million British people out of work. It's going to devastate the food, clothing, and textile industry. So there's a lot of change going on, and we don't have a plan. And I say this is the potential for the greatest disruption of jobs in the history of the world, and no one really wants to talk about it. Now, who cares in some ways, except this? They asked 1,800 of the top experts in AI and robotics, people like that were on the stage, and half of them say that if we don't do something, there will be masses of people who are effectively unemployable and a breakdown in the social order, and I would say the election of Donald Trump fits right into that context completely of what we're seeing today. So what do we do? So I went out and I listened to all these people and I did this study and I wrote a book, Raising the Floor. And if people don't have enough good jobs, then what should we do? I thought, well, create more good jobs. But then I thought about it and said, you know, if you want to end poverty and you want to end economic insecurity, you don't give people jobs, you give people money. And as Groucho Marx says, while money can't buy happiness, it certainly lets you choose your own form of misery. And so my idea was very simple. Let's have a universal basic income. And it's not a new idea. Actually, Thomas Paine proposed it when he wrote the Constitution, that when we had all this land we had won from the Revolutionary War for Britain and we were going to sell it off, that we should give every American 15 pounds sterling for the rest of their lives in return for the fact that we were taking public property, won in a war, and turned it over to private property. And then we saw Richard Nixon, of all people, the President of the United States in 1970, along with Milton Friedman, one of the most conservative economists in the country, actually propose a basic income. He proposed $10,000 a year. My plan is very simple. The poverty rate in America is, for a single person, is $11,994 a year. If you want to end poverty, give everybody $1,000 a month. That's $12,000 a year. Alaska gives everyone $1,300 to $2,000 a year from the oil revenue, so it's really not, again, a new idea, and it actually passed the House and the Senate of the United States, the House in the United States twice, but couldn't pass the Senate, and we became the country closest in the world to do this. But it's not just our right wing or a Nixon idea. Martin Luther King, after seeing all the poverty programs that were created after the Civil War, said this: I'm now convinced that the simplest approach will prove to be the most effective. The solution to poverty is to abolish it directly by a guaranteed income. And that's what his last book was about. These poverty programs are not working for people. We should give them cash. And today's most progressive economists, like Bob Reich, like Paul Krugman, like Joe Stiglitz, have all become proponents of a universal basic income. It's not just a Democratic or a left-wing idea. Look at all the Nobel Prize winners, left and right. On the left-hand side of the screen, we now have Richard Branson and Mark Zuckerberg and Elon Musk and Charles Murray all promoting a universal basic income. And you may have seen that Hillary Clinton actually thought about a universal basic income in her campaign, but couldn't make it work. And then, of course, there is our president, former president of the United States, who, as he was leaving office, said, we are going to have to really reconsider the idea because of all of the change that we're seeing all around us of a universal basic income. Now, you may think this is a wild idea. You may think it's fantasy, but people are now trying it in Finland, in Scotland, in Canada, in Oakland, California, soon to be in India and Kenya and Taiwan. People are giving people money without asking them to work or fill out papers, simply because they're citizens of the country and trying to figure out what does that do for people. So what would you do if you had $1,000 a month? Not to get rid of work, not to substitute for work, but to be add on to it. Well, maybe if you're an entrepreneur, you could actually take a risk of starting a business. Maybe if you're in an abusive relationship, you could walk away. Maybe if you're a felon, you wouldn't have to commit a crime when you got out of prison. Maybe when you're a worker, you have your own strike fund and be able to walk away from crappy jobs and crappy employers. A universal basic income has all kinds of opportunities. It is a dream that is beginning to become potentially reality, and it's something that can come true. I guarantee you that by 2020 or 2024, we will have a person running for the President of the United States on a universal basic income. There are 5 universal basic income parties, the Pirate Party, Jeremy Corbyn, and others supporting universal basic income around the world. If you want to end poverty, give people money. If you want to provide stability, give people money. And for all the people who says it can't be done, stop interrupting the people that are doing it. Thank you very much.